Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and this morning we're visiting with James Denham, who has experienced many ups and downs on his spiritual journey. As an agnostic, he served in the infantry with the U.S. Army in the Vietnam War. Only years afterward did he become a Christian and eventually an ordained minister. He's worked as a common laborer and also been educated and obtained university and master's degrees. Early in his professional life, he worked selling fine art and real estate, but after committing himself to Christ, he served as a hospice and hospital chaplain and has served 3 churches as their pastor. As a Christian for over 40 years, his career positions have always been a visible and outward expression of his commitment to Christ, yet all the while he was struggling in private and working alone to develop understanding and deepen his understanding of how to pray and hear the will of God. For more information about the author and his book, please visit www.answerday.com. Here to discuss his new book, Answer Day, One Soul's Journey in Discovering a New Way to Pray and Knowing the Exact Day Your Prayer Will Be Answered, is James Denham. Jim Denham, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
So, Jim, you started out as an agnostic. They say that there are no atheists in foxholes, but I guess you can be an agnostic in a foxhole.
Well, I guess you could be an atheist too, but I was agnostic. I was brought up in the church. My father was a minister. But in college, I fell away from faith and fell away from God. I began to question everything and got caught up in the Vietnam War in 1967. And while in Vietnam, I was still an agnostic. I just didn't understand God. And part of my experience there is in the book, in that I was walking along a rice paddy dyke, asking myself about the men that had been killed just the day before. And I thought, well, okay, if I die, I die. If I get killed in this war, I get killed. And if I do and go to hell because I'm being honest with God that I don't know if God is there or not, well, then send me to hell. Because I can't lie to God. That can't be an accurate way to deal with God. And then it happened. It was like I was suddenly walking in like a bubble of peace and comfort. I kept walking along the rice paddy dyke, but I couldn't believe what was happening, and I didn't understand what was happening. But I felt total peace, total acceptance, but I didn't know exactly why and how and what did that mean. And for several days I couldn't talk about it, even though it just lasted a couple of minutes. I still didn't know what to do with it, and I puzzled over that. The experience, and this is part of why I wrote this book, is that God wants relationship with anybody, even people who question God's existence. You don't have to suddenly believe a whole list of faith articles for God to somehow want to get along with you, to interact with you, to connect with anybody, everybody that is seeking Him.
Now, you say that, but...
And God sends me to hell, I'm not going to lie that I believe in something I don't believe in. Well, God heard that, obviously, but I didn't understand it at the time. But it means to me that God is wanting relationship with anybody that'll even just gently knock on the door. God is wanting us, each of us.
So as you looked at the Vietnam War, you were facing an attack from an enemy that, did you understand, did you have, and I grew up during the Vietnam era, did you have an understanding as to why you were there and the purpose you were fulfilling, and did you feel that you were doing something that was noble, right, just, or were you just following orders?
Well, it's a good question. What happened is the year before, when I was in college, I was agnostic, I was lost, I was confused. And one night, very late, it just suddenly dawned on me, just commit suicide. Just run over to the dorm window and jump out. And I was on a third floor, so that would mean I would kill myself. Well, I went over, starting to climb out of the window, and a scripture came to me I'd heard years before, and that was the words of Jesus, that greater love hath no man than he will lay down himself for his friends. And I thought, oh, that makes more sense. Not because Jesus said it, but because it just seemed like a more noble way to die than just jump out of a window. And as I processed that over the next few days, I thought, well, maybe I'll get caught up in the war, the Vietnam War. And so that's why I went in part. The other part was I thought we were fighting for freedom, to help the Vietnamese, to fight off the communists. And so it reinforced that decision for me as being the right one. So I went to Vietnam willingly. I volunteered for the draft, and did a good job there. And I did follow orders, but I went there because I wanted to be there.
So here your father's a pastor.
Correct?
Still in the ministry.
Well, he died 20 years ago.
Okay. Now, he tried 20 years before that, or he was alive when you were in Vietnam?
He was alive when I was in Vietnam.
Okay. And he was alive during your agnostic struggle?
Yes.
How did you relate to your minister father in your agnostic struggle versus his radically sold-out commitment to serve God?
Not very well. We had our problems. I would not openly attack what he was saying. I was mostly internally processing it. Occasionally I would go to church. It just didn't make sense. It wasn't working for me. But he and I did not argue, but we were not very close.
Can I ask you what the denominational background was?
My father was a Southern Baptist.
Okay.
He and his father, and I as well, went to the Southern Baptist Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky.
Okay. So you come to faith. What do you do with that faith? You're in Vietnam now, and you've gone from agnostic to a believer.
No. When I was in Vietnam, I entered Vietnam as an agnostic, and I left an agnostic.
Okay.
But because I had that experience, I was struggling with what that meant. And that was in 1968.
Okay.
And then after I got out of Vietnam, came back to the United States, entered the University of Texas, graduated in December of 1970, ended up the next year selling real estate for a while, and then I ran an art gallery for a while. And then in January of 72, I was buying a home. I was financially doing well. I had a cute girlfriend, several of them. I had a good life. I mean, things were going along pretty good, but I was unhappy. Well, my roommate, he had to go to Houston to be with his family during the holidays. So I was alone that New Year's Eve weekend, and I had 3 TVs going, watching every football game that was on. And somewhere after about 6 or 7 or 8 ball games, I just got up and cut them all off and started wandering around my house, thinking, what's wrong with me? I have got it made, and I'm unhappy. What's missing? And I went through the long list of all the things I had, and then the thought occurred to me, I've left God out. Bam! And that's when it happened. I felt like I had stuck my hand into an electric socket. I had this sudden jolt of energy. It stopped. And then it happened again. And I suddenly realized there is a God. God is interacting with me. And that changed everything. And that's when the turnaround came. But this was now the third interaction I had had. I had one when I was age 12. And it's very difficult to explain. But I had a sense of the presence of God. And the only thing I can remember about it that happened before that is that I was, as a 12-year-old, I was thinking, well, where exactly is God? And then I had this sense of the presence of God. And I told my father about it, and he was, of course, delighted. And several weeks later, I'm baptized in the church. And I began to embrace the faith. But over time, I didn't pay much attention to it. Lazy, distracted, caught up in being a teenager. And by the time I went to college, my faith didn't amount to much of anything. It was just, and I just thought, I don't get it anymore. I don't understand it anymore. I had this experience in Vietnam. That's the second time. And then this third time, that's the one that just, it was like getting hit by a 2x4. There was no, some people have tried to tell me that this was, a psychological expression of this or that. But I can tell you, it was real. I don't know how to understand it. I didn't deserve it. I didn't earn it. All I did was say, I've left God out. And this is a big part, and this carries through in the book, that God is wanting interaction with us. And you don't have to be a firm believer. You don't have to do anything except just gently knock on the door. Say, when I tell people that I've had these three experiences, some have said, I wish I'd have had something like that. I never had that. So why do you get it? Well, I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. The best answer I got was from another minister. He told me, I wish I'd have had an experience like that. He said, but my experience was very gentle, and I just felt the sense of God calling me to the ministry. And what occurred to me in that is, I was a hard case. I don't know what else to say. A gentle, quiet word to me just wasn't going to get it. John Wesley at Aldersgate had this, his heart was strangely warmed. That brought him into a powerful understanding of God and his relationship with God. But that wouldn't have worked with me. So that's my only sense of why I've had this, is just God uses what it takes to get to us.
Was your father alive at this time?
Yes, my father died in 1997, so he was alive.
So did you share this experience with him?
That very next morning, yes.
Okay, and how did he respond, and what was his reaction to your profession of faith?
He was delighted, thrilled. He was also kind of flabbergasted. But he realized it was genuine and very much was excited for me. He kind of canceled what he was doing that day, trying to rearrange his work to be with me, to help me, and was very much supportive of me in this.
The decision to go on to seminary, where did that come from?
Well, it came from him, and I said no. I told you I'm a hard case. I said no to him. I didn't understand that that's what my experience meant. In other words, I had this experience, but I didn't know why I had it, and I didn't know what you do with it. Now, he said going to seminary would help me understand it, but I pushed back. I quit my job at the art gallery and did construction work for the next year and a half, trying to think it through. You're digging a ditch, you've got time to think. And that's what I needed. I needed to process it. About a year and a half after I had this experience, my mother also had been urging me to go to seminary. And I had been arguing with her. And in the process of all of that, she suddenly died of a heart attack.
Mm.
Oh, in fact, I mean, it just grieves me to this day. But our last conversation was an argument. And it was an argument over the fact that she said, you are wasting your life. You're not dealing with this experience the way you should. Go to seminary, get involved somehow, but you're just throwing it away. And then she died, and so then I kicked around myself pretty good for a while and thought, okay, I'll give seminary a try. And that's when I entered the Presbyterian seminary in the fall of 1973 in Austin.
And how was that experience for you, hearing from a theological approach to God?
Blech. I didn't like it. I wanted to know what had happened to me. Why did that happen to me? I couldn't have earned it. What does it mean? What does God want of anybody? How do I know I'm called to be in the ministry? How do I know what God's will is for Jim Denham? How do I know that? And what am I being taught? Greek. I'm being taught a review of the Old Testament, introduction to the New Testament. I mean, what they were teaching is fine. Okay, it's good stuff, but it wasn't answering my questions. And I was very frustrated with that.
So what did you do?
Well, I ended up not going to class a whole lot. When I did, I was getting into some arguments with people. I was not a good student. And by the end of the second semester, which would have been May of 70, get my numbers right here, but the next May of 74, I think they were delighted that I was dropping out and not coming back. I was not winning any love there. But that summer, it just kept nagging at me. It wasn't that what they said was bad or wrong, and I needed to hear what they had to say, but I just couldn't get my answers. So I decided to try the school that my father and mother and my grandfather all went to, Southern Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky. So I went there. I was accepted, started there in August of 74, and I just was suddenly all depressed and frustrated again. I know it was a different school and there were some differences, but it's like the same thing. Introduction to the New Testament, review of the Old Testament, Greek, and so forth. It was just the same. It seemed like the same thing. So I thought about dropping out. I thought, I'm getting nowhere. And one afternoon, it was blazing hot, early September. I was walking from the cafeteria on campus back to my dorm room, which was on the top floor of what was then the WMU hall. It wasn't air conditioned, just stinking hot. Just sort of walking slowly back when a group of students were sitting in the shade of the building. And one of them said, "Hey, sit down with us." Now, I didn't know the person. I didn't know any of them. So I did. And they were talking about different things. And then suddenly it turned to the will of God. And one of them said, "Well, how do you know what the will of God is? How do I know what God really wants me to do? Do I take this church, or do I become a senior minister? Should I be a chaplain? I mean, how do you know that?" And different people started dumping on that and saying different things, but I got real attentive because these were questions I was asking. And one of them finally said, "Well, I know God's will is to obey the Ten Commandments. It is to proclaim Christ in the Great Commission." And somebody else said, yeah, well, that's for everybody. But what about me? Do I try to get a job in Kentucky, or do I try to go back to my home I think it was in Florida somewhere? You know, what does God want of me? How do I know that? Man, I was all over that. I was listening. I didn't say anything, but I was listening. I wanted to know because these were my questions. And then it's turned to fasting. And one of them said something about, well, fasting has always helped me to know the will of God. And then somebody else said, well, I've had a lot of trouble with fasting. And then there was this kind of discussion about fasting for a while. And then somebody else said something about, well, I think you're asking too many questions has been my problem. I have too many prayer requests. If God answers my prayer, I'm not sure which answer goes to which prayer. And then somebody else said something about you need to wait. Wait for God to answer. And then it was getting really dark by then, and the group broke up. And I went up to my dorm room and laid down on my bed and had a little electric fan just going back and forth, trying to cool things off. But I was turning all these things over in my head, over and over. And then I made a decision. Okay, I'm asking too many prayers. I'm doing that. And I need to just focus on one thing. Just have one prayer request. And, okay, if I had one prayer request, well, then how do I know I'll get an answer? And so this idea of fasting and waiting, and then suddenly it just clicked for me. Why don't I have my one prayer request, wait a period of time, and fast towards that moment? So I kicked that around a little bit and came up with the idea, and I just picked it out of a hat, 10 weeks. I'll fast one day a week for 10 weeks, and on my 10th fast day, if God's got anything to say to me, I am wide open on that day, that one day. I don't want to know beforehand.
Okay.
I want to know that day.
All right, I want you to hold that thought because we need to go to break. We're talking with Jim Denham, author of Answer Day, One Soul's Journey in Discovering a New Way to Pray and Knowing the Exact Day Your Prayer Will Be Answered. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, Jim's going to tell us the secret that all of us have been longing for, all of us have been searching for, on when we'll know what day our prayer will be answered. We'll be right back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live, 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our one-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking to James Denham, author of Answer Day, One Soul's Journey in Discovering a New Way to Pray and Knowing the Exact Day Your Prayer Will Be Answered. Jim Denham, welcome back to Revealing the Truth.
Thank you.
So you came out from under the tree, went back to the dorm room, began to ponder this whole idea of too many prayers, this concept of praying, fasting, waiting, and all of a sudden something comes to you that says, I think I'm on to something. Why don't I approach the Lord this way and see whether or not this works? What was that system that you had created, designed, developed, discovered that made you feel like you had stumbled on to a secret way to have prayer answered?
Well, I think part of it was just my incredible hunger to get my questions answered. And so as I lay awake that evening, trying to think these different things through, it suddenly occurred to me there could be a new way to do this. And that's part of what the cover of the book captures. That is this sense of I saw kind of a different reality. Now, literally, I didn't see that, but it was a real breakthrough moment for me. And I thought, okay, now I could be dead wrong. And I knew that. But what I wanted to try to do was set up an answer day 10 weeks away. I would fast one day a week, Each of those 10 weeks, I would have just this one question that I wanted answered, and I wouldn't tell anybody. And that's critical to this process, as I understand it and as it's worked for me. You don't let anybody know what you're doing. It's not between you and them anyway. It's between you and the Lord. So I did it. Now, some people realized I wasn't eating, and so I would admit to the fact that I was fasting.
Right.
But they didn't know why. There wasn't a hint of why. Well, the 10 weeks finally came to an end. And on that fast day, I woke up and I was just eager. I just was ready to just soak up anything and everything that would come my way. And so I kind of stumbled through my normal day, went to classes, went to the mailbox, ate meals. I didn't eat, I went to the cafeteria. I wouldn't eat a meal, but I would have a glass of iced tea. I was simply listening, trying to be open to anything. Well, what began to come through was a certain word. And the word kept being repeated. And at first I dismissed it because it didn't really fit my question. And my question was, if I'm to be a servant of God, what do you want me to do? What do I do? That was my question. So I'm listening, and the word kept coming up was Hawaii. I don't know what. So I thought, well, that isn't it. So I kept listening, but the word kept coming up, and it came up over and over again in different ways. Somebody would just make a casual comment about Hawaii. Well, I'm in Louisville, Kentucky. People don't talk about Hawaii that much in Louisville, Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
By the end of the day and into the night, I had like 12 direct comments to me in one way or another about Hawaii. Well, that was a long night because I'm thinking, now, wait a minute. This doesn't add up. This doesn't really fit my question. I was very frustrated with my answer. I'm telling you, I was distraught. So I kicked this around and kicked it around for at least 3 weeks. And then it occurred to me, well, if this is the answer, then I can repeat the process and I should get the exact same answer again. If this is God speaking to me, then the answer should be validated a second time. And part of what came to me later was this whole story out of the Old Testament about fleecing, that you can talk to God, you can reason with God, trying to validate what God is saying to you. So I set up the process again. 10 weeks away. I'd fast 1 day a week, did not tell a soul the first time, didn't tell anybody about my answer the first time. Nobody knew what I was doing. No one. So I repeated the whole process again. And then the 10th fast day, I was wide open again. Also, during those 10 weeks, I was kind of taking mental notes. How many times do people even mention Hawaii? Well, maybe once or twice a week, some reference would come up. So I thought, well, okay, that's kind of, I guess that's normal. Sometimes nothing. But on that second answer day, I got even more references to Hawaii. There were like 15 or more. I was just blown away. And so at that point, I thought, well, now I can't argue that I got the answer. This process works, but does it? I mean, or is this nonsense? I mean, what do I do with Hawaii? I thought, well, okay, go to Hawaii, I guess, but do I drop out of school? I mean, I don't know anybody in Hawaii. I couldn't process it very well. But one of the things that occurred on that second answer day was in my ethics class, the professor said, I've gotten a letter from the Home Mission Board in Hawaii, and they're looking for people who are willing to be summer missionaries this next summer, and they don't pay anything, and you have to raise all your money to go, but there are openings there. And everybody in the class just laughed. Yeah, let's all go to Hawaii. Well, after class, or the next day, actually, I went to see this professor. And I asked him about it, and he told me about it. And then he said to me, kind of looked at me kind of funny. He said, you know what? You're the only person in all the classes that I mentioned it. Seemingly everybody wanted to go. You're the only one that said anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote the letter. They sent me a letter back. Thank you for that. Send us some more information. I did that. And early June, I was in Hawaii. Had my clothes in my little suitcase and ended up being assigned to the Kahului Baptist Church on Maui. Lived with the minister and his wife and their small son. They had kind of a breezeway and then a little apartment on the side, and I lived in that little apartment and was there for like 9 weeks and helped the minister do what he did. I did a little preaching, worked with the youth, did some pastoral care, visited homes, visited with a dying patient, and he also made a number of hospital calls. And suddenly the summer's over, and I'm getting on an airplane coming back to Louisville, Kentucky, trying to figure out how all that fit together. What was my answer? So it took me a while to puzzle through that, but my sense of it was, and in these 40 plus years since then, I've done all those things. It's like I got a bigger answer than I could absorb. I've been a pastor. I've been an associate pastor. I've done preaching. I've worked in hospitals. I've worked with dying patients. I've worked with youth. I've done all those things. And as I've lived out my life, I have lived into all of those.
So, trying to wrap this up, over the course of these 40 years, you've created a technique where you have a prayer you go to the Lord with. You fast for 10 weeks. You fast one day a week for 10 weeks.
Right.
And you focus only on that prayer. You don't add to or take away from that specific prayer. And is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I do pray about other things, but I'm praying towards this answer day that's 10 weeks out. And it's on that day that I'm open. Now, in the years after that, I'll admit it, I started playing with it. And I was trying to understand it. It's hard to explain. I found something that I didn't totally comprehend. So here's something that works, but why does it work? And well, why not a shorter time? Why wait 10 weeks? Why not wait 1 week or 2 weeks? And so I experimented with that, only to discover it didn't work. That trying to have my answer day at that short of a time, plus I had this whole series of other questions I was asking. It's like, why just have one question every 10 weeks? Why don't I set it up where every other week I can have an answer? And I admit it was foolish of me. But it was in that process that I realized this system doesn't work that way. This system relies on my integrity of the question, the sincerity of my heart, that God, please answer this one question for me, rather than, hey, I've got a whole bunch of questions. Let me ask this, 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 and this. It doesn't work that way.
Is there anything in Scripture that is anything that models itself, even by comparison, or anyone biblically who has shared that same kind of experience with you on an ongoing basis, because you're saying that this is a continual process that you have had success with and shared with others who have also had success with, so much so that you've been willing to make the statement in the title of your book, One Soul's Journey in Discovering a New Way to Pray and Knowing the Exact Day that your prayer will be answered. Not saying that your prayer, but you're saying my prayer. You're saying to the world, I have in my hand Einstein's theory of relativity. I have God's theory of biblical answerability, and here's his pattern. Lay something before his altar, fast 1 day a week, and on the 10th week, you will have your answer.
Well, there are exceptions to that, but let me say several things. You asked the first question about biblically. Is there any basis for this? Isaiah 58.
Okay.
Isaiah 58. And part of what it says is that if you fast correctly, God says, I will hear you. I will answer your prayer. Well, that was key for me. That was some validation for me with this, that fasting was a part of it. What I've discovered since then, that fasting is not essential. What's essential is sacrifice. Sacrifice of my time, my money, my love, my energy to other people. The fact that I didn't eat breakfast or lunch, nah, that's not too impressive to God. It's hard to do. Fasting is difficult. But the real issue is, am I loving other people? Am I showing kindness? Am I helping people in need? Mm-hmm. So the biblical basis, I think, is at least in part there. The other part of this is the example that I use in my book, and I say this process is sort of like baking a cake. Now, here are the things you have to do to bake a cake. You have these instructions. Well, what if you put in the wrong ingredients or leave out some ingredients? What if you put the temperature way too low? Or what if you pull it out of the oven too early? Well, you've got a mess. And this process is like unto that. If you don't do it correctly, it isn't going to work very well for you. It's going to be kind of goofy or a mess or nothing at all. But if your heart is pure on this, God wants you.
So do I have to wait 10 weeks for all my prayers to be answered?
No, this is not the only way to pray. People have been praying for thousands of years, and God has heard them just one-on-one. And for a number of people, their prayers are answered immediately. They have a real sense of God's immediate presence with them and guiding them. And this is in no way to say that there's anything wrong with that. But what happens when your prayers don't get answered? You don't hear an answer. Oh, is it my fault? I just didn't have enough faith. Is it my fault? I'm just too dumb to hear it when it comes. And what this opened up for me was, here's a way to help me focus with my limitations, my inabilities, my problems. God's willing to work with me. God's willing to work with me in this process. But my question has to be good. My question needs to be pure and honest. I have to be truly seeking in my heart to know God's will on this particular issue. And the waiting of the 10 weeks is not, I don't think it manipulates God. It's manipulating me. It's making me focus. What is my one prayer? What is the one thing I need from God? And it's worked for me time and time again.
It's a large claim to have created a way to state that we would know the exact day that our prayer is answered, since there are so many time-sensitive, time-critical immediacies, accidents, heart attacks, strokes, critical situations. Help me understand the framework. Are these the larger life decisions? Are these is there a particular area? Because honestly, without the biblical support of having the backing of Scripture, saying that I can predict the end times, or saying that I can predict the return of Jesus, or I can say that my prayer is for all of Israel to be saved. All right, that's my prayer every day. All right, I fast every day. All right, I don't eat until evening of every day. Okay, that has been my pattern. So I've been praying this for 22 years and fasting, and it's not coming on the 10th day, the 10th week that all of Israel is saved. It's not coming on the 20th week. It's not coming on the 30th week. And it is the passion and desire of my heart that I would see my people who perish for lack of knowledge come to faith. And I've devoted 22 years of my life in offering this prayer before God, interceding, and it's not being answered. It's being answered, but it's being answered one soul at a time. All right? But my prayer is for the nation, for Jesus' return and the nation be saved. And so I want to make sure that we're not, just to put it directly, we're not snake oil salesmen. We're not offering a panacea of prayer. We're saying that, or you're saying that in your experience, okay, in matters of major import to you, and you've shared this with others, you have gained a certain amount of clarity, and it seems to have come during this cycle. But it's not absolute.
Well, I can't say what God is going to, what the answer will be. My prayer, your prayer, for example, I think the question would be, what is the most effective way for me to fulfill my mission of saving the house of Israel? And you fast and pray for 10 weeks, or you set a time frame. You say you fast every day, so you would also make sure that you are being compassionate and caring on your fast, during your fast. So it's an acceptable fast, according to Isaiah 58. But on that one day, and it's total secret, nobody knows what that day is. You do, but they don't. And see what God would say to you. It could be a new insight for you. It could be, I don't know. That's between you and the Lord. But I believe God gives us what we can then go on. And sometimes it's just a clue. It was like Hawaii. Huh? Well, what do I do with that? So are you going to act on this clue that you get, this limited amount of information? Or do you get a very clear answer?
Let me see if I can position this.
Sure.
For those of you out there struggling to hear the voice of the Lord, to hear your prayers answered, to have something pressing on you, and you don't know how, or you've tried other ways and they don't seem to be working, here is a way that has worked for Jim Denham and for some of the people that he has shared it with, as a way that you might try, like Gideon's fleece, or like Isaiah's fasting, that this is a method that has worked effectively in Jim's life and could possibly work effectively in yours. Not a panacea, not the secret holy grail to how to appeal to the Father's heart and have him at your instruction and command at the end of 10 weeks show up and deliver because you did it this way. But for you who are struggling to find a way to pray, this just might be an answer for you to get you on the path to prayer and on the path to hearing prayers answered. Jim Denham, thank you for sharing Answering Day with us here on Revealing the Truth.
Thank you, Eric. This has been a real pleasure for me to be honest and open.
God bless
Bless you in your ministry.
Thank you so much, and may the Lord bless you as well. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring in the next edition of Revealing the Truth.